Here we go. We are live. So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Godox Facebook Live Talk. And today we have the great honor to interview with Luke Edmondson and with David. Hi, guys.
Hey.
So today we are going to talk about fine art, portrait, which is, I think, Luke has this unique style, right, which everybody knows, and so I'll leave everything to Luke, and you can talk about that yourself. I'll leave everything to you, shall we?
Sure.
And we have a very long lecture slides to run through, and lots of contents, including BTS, as well as some, retouching, because the contents are so full, and we'll try to fit everything in 1 hour and a half. We actually have to do a speed edit. So enjoy, guys.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having us again. I would encourage anybody who's watching this to go back and watch our first talk that we did, which was on kind of the more of the theoretical side of making a complete picture. What is it that we're looking to put in the content of our picture? And then the second talk that we did was on LED lighting. And from this one, what we're looking at is kind of trying to bring things down to a very basic level for people, especially those that might be interested in fine art photography. Or fine art portraiture. And of course, the first question that we kind of all ask, is kind of popular, but basically we say, well, we'll know it when we see it. We know when we see art. But what can we actually say to quantify what is fine art photography? And so it's to us, I think to many people, it's any type of work that conveys an idea, a message, has emotion to it, it's conveying an emotion to it. There's a depth to the work that we're looking at. It goes beyond what we would say is just a literal representation.
And more than just storytelling.
Yeah, it's more than just storytelling, right? We can storytell sometimes in a very simple manner. We talked about that in the LED lighting of just trying to add depth perhaps to our backgrounds or something to try and add a little story, but that's not necessarily something that's going to be fine art portraiture or fine art photography. Once we get beyond the literal representation, then the next thing that we have to ask ourselves is, what is it that we're trying to do? Well, our subject or our scene needs to convey that message that we talked about, and that can be done in either a simple or a complex way. So what do I mean by that? You could take a very broad topic, whatever might be popular or du jour of the day or something that's personal to you. Let's just talk about a simple concept like birth, right? So you could talk about birth as a whole pregnancy journey, or you could talk about birth as the more specific act that's occurring there. You could talk about the joy of life, but you can also distill it down to a very particular moment. And I know with you in the car today, I was talking to you about how even the idea of baking cookies was something I was thinking about yesterday. And when I thought about what's truly universal about baking cookies, sure, you see lots of pictures that might be somebody with a glass of milk and it says what they're doing.
Or flour on the nose.
Or flour on the nose, right? These kind of things. But, if you could illustrate to people that feeling, and Aries, tell me if this is true for you, but, when you bake cookies, there's something about eating the warm cookie. Like right when it's come out of the oven, it's still got a little softness to it, right? And there's just kind of a certain feeling that comes along with that.
And you have this feeling like, hey, this is before it's all supposed to actually be served.
Yeah.
I get to have one in advance.
That's right. And so that might be distilling something down to a particular moment in the bigger arc. And so that's what we're trying to say to you that you're looking to do. You want to have, when you do fine art, you want to have something that is personal about it. It reflects the explorations of an artist.
Sure, and their statement and their vision, what they're trying to say to their audience.
Yeah. So what do we mean even by that? Well, it's the author's reality transformed, right? That's a good acronym perhaps for art. It's the author's reality is transformed. And so one of the things that you want to do is you want to have a vision when you go into it, which is why we talk so much about in the making a complete picture, like how do you go about thinking through your photographs to begin with. And then finally, as you're getting into different things, it needs to have intention, it needs to engage our audience when they look at it. It needs to have a refinedness to the technique. because when we look at something we consider art, it's probably not something that looks either artificial or something that looks like it's a mere happen chance, like a snapshot or a documentary style like that. And one of the things about technique is that we say it shouldn't overpower the vision of the artist, unless, the caveat to anything is there's always an exception. And the exception would be if the technique itself is supposed to draw attention to itself, much like Jackson Pollock did with the way that he did his drops on his canvas, right? The technique there became very much to the forefront of what he was trying to communicate in terms of the paint itself.
Yeah, I think technique in general should be secondary to whatever you're trying to convey. It should just almost grow on you. After you see several pieces from the art, you go, I really like the kind of the style that they're presenting in the technique.
Well, so that brings us to an interesting thing. Fine art, to some degree, there should be a unified feeling to the body of work from the artist or from a series of pieces that they've created. So what we thought we'd start by doing with you guys is basically saying, Aries, here's kind of 3 questions, if you can be the audience, and or if you can also tell us things that people in the audience are asking in terms of questions. And so we're asking ourselves why when we look at it. We're asking what's the intent, what's the message? So the why, the intent, and the message. And so what we wanted to show you guys,
It starts with a portrait.
first is starting with a portrait. This is not fine art, okay? This is a young girl who we started shooting when she was, how old? 2 years old, right? And we were very fortunate in that she was going to come in and spend some time with us.
You returned with me this summer.
Yep. And so as part of that, we said, we will go out and do a shoot with you at least once or twice a week to be able to create some things.
And this year she's a high school senior, so we were trying to do different, more fine art type things for her high school senior shoot that would be different than just high school senior portraits.
That's exactly right. So our first shot that we started with essentially has kind of a sense of, she's in an old 1850s farmhouse. She's by a candle. We wanted to light it with a lot of mood to it, so it has kind of a blue type feeling.
Well, her favorite movie is The Women,
Uh-huh.
and so this is about her and her creative process because she is an artist. But in Little Women, they would always put on a special coat, even over their pajamas when they were starting their creative adventure.
So pulling on that thread, taking the idea of Little Women and creating this type of coat, and the fact that oftentimes the artistry was early in the morning was the time that she would get up to be able to do some of her work and work by candlelight. And so therefore, you wind up with a picture that looks something like this. And so you can kind of see all those different elements coming together within this particular piece. But she's there, she has her books, she has her art. If you could zoom in closer, you'd be able to see that she has her drawing pen, and so she's beginning her work there.
And we had only rented this facility for 2 hours, so we ended up with 2 different shots because basically by the time we set up shot, we wrote down, it was probably an hour at each place.
Yep. So what was the key thing? Well, we spent more time on this one than on any of them.
Yeah.
Okay. What was the key thing that we were looking for in terms of our equipment? We wanted to be lightweight. We wanted to be portable. Because people say, well, how did you light it? What did you use? Right. And so for this one, we ended up using the LC500. And various reasons. Number one, the barn doors became particularly beneficial for us.
It chiseled the light on her face.
Yeah. It also produced a soft quality of light. It was a continuous light that we could use. And then we also wanted to be able to have the ability to change our color temperature. So those are all the things that informed our decision to use the tool that we use. So this gives you an idea of what the picture looked like coming straight out of camera. And you can see that we have our stands there. I shot some behind the scenes pictures just with my iPhone. Here's the vantage point that you would see from camera as Dad's looking through there, and you can see that we have our barn door coming in over the top on a boom. This brings you into the scene a bit more. And what you should see here is that we have essentially 3 lights that are shown in this picture. One coming in on top, that's our hair light. One that's coming in from the right-hand side door, and that we use as a separation light. And then we have one that's tilted that we're using in order to be able to create our form on her face.
Yes, and put a little barn door on it so that it would kind of feather off where the candle was.
Not only feather off, but it wouldn't spill. In other words, because I think sometimes if we're really talking to people that are starting out, what do we mean by feather and things like that? We didn't want the light to strike the candle. We wanted it to be flagged from that.
And in doing that, it was overexposing the book, and so it was very important to be able to pull up on that little barn door.
Yep. Now, one of the things that you often find when you use directional light and you start chiseling somebody's face is that sometimes your contrast ratios can become a little bit too high. It can become a little too fast to change from light to dark. That's what we mean by when we say our contrast ratios. And so the answer there, as we spin around here, is you can see since it had a white wall there, all we had to do is take one more light and bounce it into the wall in front of her. And then that acts as our fill light. So 4 lights to be able to light that shot and pull it together. And you can see how each one has a specific purpose in terms of what it does. I love our sirens in our, it's very exciting today. So this, we take you back here, and then this becomes the final version of what we wanted it to look like, to reflect.
Yeah.
So does that kind of walk you through kind of how the process was done? What would be a question you would have if you were somebody starting out, Aries, about how to pull off?
I would want to, if possible, could we just zoom in like 200% so people can see the amazing details of her pen, what she's drawing, and all the elements.
Sure.
And
I
think it's on top left. I think it's on top left corner of the zoom.
It would be, but I think I've hidden that screen real quick. So let me just zoom in one more time.
Yeah, just zoom like.
Yep. You want me to zoom again?
Yeah. I think there's a zoom you can select about 200% or something like that. Yeah, on the top left corner. Yeah. Yeah.
I'll
That's
run
it.
it up for you. Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
200% you want.
Now just in general, so people can see, because it's the problem we had with last week, because it's the broadcasting is about 720p.
Yep.
People on the other end, they wouldn't be able to see that as much details as showing in front of
So here
yours
you
or
can
my
see
screen.
it's not
Yeah.
just her in the active drawing, but she has one of her drawings here on the page. And even, sometimes when people do things with candles, one of the things they oftentimes don't take enough time in terms of making it believable is going ahead and letting some of that wax start to spill. Like if I want to believe somebody's been spending a period of time, then I need to see the natural elements that are there having done what we would expect them to do. So those are some little clues in terms of doing things. Then you can see the light coming into hit her face. Yep.
Yeah, here's a question, Luke, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Yeah.
What's the question?
It's showing up here. Can you see it on the
Yes. What exposure did you achieve with that setup? Yep. So that in order to let the candlelight come through, generally speaking, whenever we use candlelight, we typically try and shoot it at about a 30th of a second, just to let the warmth of the candle come through.
So the ambient light.
Yep. So I'm going to say to you that we were shooting at about ISO 800 at a 30th of a second, and at f5.6. And I'll confirm that for you real quick, that I can do that fast.
You know what? I bet that's pretty close to being accurate.
Yep.
After all these years, you can pretty much guess exactly what you would have set your camera to ahead of time.
Yep. Okay, so I lied to you. We were shooting at ISO 800 at a 40th of a second at f5.6. No, not 500. ISO 500, 40th of a second at f5.6. What we did in order to get this shot.
cool.
Yep.
It's great.
So, go ahead.
Couple of nice people saying hi.
Welcome. Hello, Mr. Guionis.
Hey, Nick.
It's good to see you, sir. So for the next shot, we then took her, and two of the elements that she had given to us that were important to her family were a pipe, and then also having a watch, a gold watch that was important to their family. And so the question becomes, what do you do with a pipe and a watch?
Yes. And she had brought it down from Minnesota. That was important. family items that she wanted to collaborate with.
Yep. So, the idea of a watch to us suggests the idea of time, clearly. The idea of a pipe also suggests time. Oftentimes we lose your time. But, the other way that people can use things like a pipe or tobacco or whatever is it can also be a way that you calm yourself, right? Sometimes people do that. So, in this particular case, what was your white balance? Yep. So our white balance for this one was set to, I think we set it to 5,000. That's what we set our white balance to, according to our metadata. So for the next shot, we said we want to show her in a sense of frustrated while she's waiting. And that's why she has the pipe. So that begins with this shot. So there she is. She's holding onto her watch. She has the pipe in her hand. And we shot within the scene.
You want to blow it up just a little bit to her hand.
Yep. So I'll go back to here. Here's what the straight out of camera shot looked like. And we did shoot it underexposed. We generally, you'll see that we shoot all of our stuff underexposed. But that would be the straight out of camera shot.
I do that specifically knowing because when I'm working on an image, I want to make sure that I have just enough detail in my highlights of my skin tone.
Yep.
And I know why I like that.
So here's this shot. We shot it with the 8300s. I know that a question I saw on a recent one was, which modifiers did you use? Did you use the Bowens modifiers? Did you use the official 8300 ones? And the answer is absolutely we used the 8300 ones because it was so much easier to have something that was convenient, portable, and fit. It's not that we couldn't use Bowens modifiers. We certainly have lots of lights for that as well, but we were trying to be compact as we moved around to be able to do things, and that was the big thing for us is that it became very portable. And so, go ahead.
I was going to have you blow that up just a little bit on the watch.
I'm going to. Yep. Here, I'll go into it right now. So let's go into 200%. Yep. Okay.
Well, who's that handsome man in the back?
Well, that's my dad. But you can see she has the pipe in her hand here. She has the watch in her hand. Yep. And then, of course, got my dad put into this particular shot. Playing the role of the conductor. Oh, hello. How are you, sir? Good to see you. So we use the built-in modifiers. We use this one right here, which is the Octobox, softbox, whatever you want to technically call it here, the softbox. And we put two lights going through the windows, and then we put one light inside. So
one for each room.
One for each room, exactly. So here's what the straight out of camera shot looked like. So you can see that I was envisioning this becoming more of a rectangle, excuse me, not rectangle, a square. It was shot like this so that we had a little bit more room to the sides if needed. And that was our exposure. Here's what I always laugh about, because I say to Dad, the most important
Sorry, how many lights did we use?
3, just 3. So the most important light to me was the light that was the light that was inside the room with me with the camera. So, as we look at this here, we know we need to have 2 lights coming from the side windows to light our subjects. But this light right here is the one that controls how contrasty it is, right? And how directional it is. So this light right here was at half power, and it was just pointed to the ceiling, so it could just bounce around in the room. Obviously, there's ambient light coming in as well. And then these were the lights as they were positioned outside the window. So we used an umbrella on the light that was closer to her, and we used the softbox on the light that was hitting my dad. And if I pull up my metadata on that for you guys real quick. This was shot at f8 at an 80th of a second, and shot with an ISO 400 with a 24 millimeter lens. And the lights on the outside were set to, she was a little bit, her light was set a little bit brighter. It was set to a 1/4 power, and the light for my dad was set to an 1/8 power. And that's what you did in your final shot.
Which is pretty amazing with these 300s, that they're powerful enough that they will overpower the daylight through the windows.
Yeah, the fascinating thing is you could have done this with a V1, you could have done this with a 600, you could have done this with a 1200, you could have done it with any of the lights that Godox offers, because we were actually cutting back the amount of power that we needed to come through here because the main thing that we wanted to do was get our lights up high enough and angled down enough that we could just cast these shadows here and have that light coming across on the floor down here. Like that was the most important part. And then just have enough light coming through here to light him, but we didn't want it to be so bright that it overpowered you and sucked you into this room. We wanted to make sure that we had enough light that was here that yet created just a bit of play off the two of them as they were so close in proximity. So that's how that picture came about.
Can I give you a little side story?
Yes.
Part of her internship is we have quite an extensive little prop closet, and she loves to play dress up, but now that she's 18, doesn't feel like she can. And so she's had so much fun this summer just trying on all the prop clothes while she's working.
Yeah, for sure. We'll show you some of those pictures too. So with the next picture, what we ended up doing is kind of an idea of harvesting, and the idea of as you are a high school senior and you're at that launching point, getting ready to head off and go into the world. And so we shot this shot like this. And so we brought in some.
Sorry, Luke. Can I interrupt really quick? There
Yes.
are two questions.
Yes.
There are two questions from the audience. Maybe
Yep.
we can go back to the previous picture and answer those two questions.
Yep.
If you could look at the screen,
Yep.
Yes.
and Jay.
Do we have problems with noise in the darks if you're underexposed? Used to, absolutely. Yes.
So we happen to shoot with the Nikon D850, and we have found that we have a great amount of latitude in terms of our dynamic range with that particular camera, which allows us to do that. Now, if you went too underexposed, it could be a problem, but just going slightly underexposed, this again here, let me go back if it slide there, but this is the actual, what we shot in camera. So was this able to be brightened up to that? Absolutely.
Yeah. But used to, yes, if you shot either a higher ISO, all of a sudden the noise would just appear in older cameras. But we didn't do any noise reduction on any of these shots.
Yep. Okay, and then the next is very nice. Can you please show the straight out of camera image with all the lighting? So that's the straight out of camera image. If that meets that need, go ahead.
Amazing details.
And then,
And again, we purposely underexposed.
yep. And then this is where the lighting was. So a light placed in the room, close to the camera, off to the side, and pointed straight up at the ceiling. So all it's going to do is bounce into the ceiling, bounce around, and just fill the ambient there. And all that does is it helps for these lights, which are very directional lights that are being pointed at the subjects. It just makes so that their shadows, essentially in these areas down here, don't go quite as dark, right? And so if I was to show it to you on the straight out of camera picture, that might be the easier, the better one to show to you. Yep.
Yep.
There we go.
That's great. Thanks, Luke.
Yep.
Yep.
Here we go. Yep. So that would be, we're trying to control how dark these areas are going here. How dark these areas are going here by bouncing that light up into the ceiling. And of course, the one thing we can't control, it's actually okay, is because the way that the light would actually come from this window is the ambient light still has some light that's casting this shadow upwards on the clock. But we wanted to have it feel like the light still was coming down on her a bit like this in terms of those shadows.
A little more direction.
Yeah, a little bit more directional on the subjects. We could have overpowered this so much that this just went dark, but that wouldn't necessarily convey the mood to the lighting that we would have wanted, right? So we took them out in the fields, and so this becomes a shot that we did with the new AD 1200. So we had 1200 watts of light to be able to work with. We used 2 power packs to be able to light them because we needed to space them on 2 different levels. So we had one light that was going to light here on the front subject and one light back here. People don't want to know what the exposure was. So we shot this one at ISO 50 at f16, a 500th of a second using high-speed sync, and it was with a 35 millimeter lens. So this being the AD 1200 Pro, I'm hopeful that y'all have seen or heard of it. This is what the actual shot looked like out of camera in order to be able to get the shot. This becomes the placement of the lights out in the field. So in this case, you don't really want to have any diffusion on the lights. We just want to direct the lights. That's why we use the more scoop type attachment. This is showing it from the camera position there as they were there in the field. And then again, that becomes the final shot. So you came in on this one and you had to do some darkening. You had to get rid of a road that was off to the right.
Yeah, I haven't even finished the shot, to be honest.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, it's just good to show people like what you can
It's
do.
in progress.
But I'm saying like these become the things that you figure out how you're going to do. The funniest thing was her pouring the water into the guy's cup, and then we have to keep pouring it back in because there's only so much water. And this is shot in Texas, and it was, roughly, what would be 100 degrees in Australia or elsewhere in Celsius, 35, 36 degrees, something like that. Like just very hot, 40 degrees, like just very, very hot.
They were melting.
Yeah.
So this entire shoot, we had about roughly 10 minutes, I would say, to get them out of the air conditioning, come out and get the shot. And that's where
Just-
the power comes in handy.
Just out of curiosity, Luke, what's the artistic reference of this? Is a reference to certain photographers or certain painters in terms of color placements as well as the subject placement?
Yeah, we didn't do that. We didn't want to make this too artsy for you.
Yeah, it's basically to Van Gogh, and he did many things on planting seeds, but this is kind of the harvest. So this is like reaping the rewards. So it's kind of like she's completed high school, she's built these friendships.
The sower, the classic Van Gogh sower.
Absolutely. And she picked these people to be in the shot with her. She picked their clothing. She did all the things because we were not only trying to teach her how to do more acting when working on fine art images, but even actually help her to even understand what it takes to art direct.
Acting is a big key that I think is part of if people are going to do more fine art portraiture versus what I say portraiture that has an artistic treatment. Because oftentimes with that, it's more about you're taking a classic portrait or a traditional portrait or a pleasing portrait, and the motive qualities are probably more easy to connect with. But at the same time, you're then just slapping some form of post-production on it to make it look arty, right? And oftentimes, whenever you're doing stuff that conveys a storytelling type piece or an idea, then their expressions might be more like you can feel what the person was going through, what it's like to carry something, the labor that they're going through. It's not always smile, look at the camera.
Absolutely. And we had seen so many high school seniors when they were having their portraits made that would put on a mask to kind of get them ready for just because this year has been so different that we decided to take it in a different vein and actually go back with more of the French doctor's mask.
Yep, so you're getting ready to talk about the next shot, which I'm all for. I was going to answer Abby's question real quick. What lights were used again? The 1200? Yes, sir. We used the 1200 Pros. So you can see here's the power pack, which you may not be able to see right now because it's actually down low. So let me come in a little bit tighter here.
See how your iPhone does.
Yep. So there's the power pack down there in the grass. And then we've got our lights up here. So there they are. 1200 head. And boom, it rocked it out. Were these at full power? Don't you know it? We're at full power. So we're putting out 2,400 watts of light on that scene just to try and get it. And we're already down at our lowest native ISO because it was shot at about 4 o'clock in the day. We wanted it to be later, but we just couldn't make it work. And the
Did you use high-speed sync?
Yes.
500th of a second.
500th of a second.
Okay.
Is what we ended up doing it at. Yep. Let's see here. I think I've gotten that all. We'll get this here. Yep. There we go.
What programs do you prefer for editing?
That's a great question. So when we show you the editing video, how about we go into the explanation of it then? Because I think that's the perfect time to answer that question. And I don't want to delay the question, but I think we could go on a rabbit trail. So you were talking about the French, and we were asked to repeat what our exposure was on that. So that one was, let me double check here, but it was a 500th of a second. I know that from memory. And f16 at a 50th, or excuse me, at ISO 50. I've said it all wrong here. Aperture was f16, and the shutter speed was 500th of a second. Is what that took. So we talked about the French pandemic here. So that's the shot that you had done here, kind of playing off of the masks that everybody is getting to wear right now.
Even the color grading of the field is a little off on purpose.
And this was
just an off year.
And this was shot with just a single AD 1200 out there in the field, correct?
Yes.
Yep. And if you look here, you know, these are things that if somebody was really starting out and wanting to know kind of how to do some stuff, if I zoom at 200% here, you can see how we're using clamps to be able to make the outfit fit or get tighter or do different things. And so you can always edit your clamps out. A lot of times people think they have to get clothing that works perfectly, or that clothing that doesn't have a hole in it, or all sorts of different things. But you can find imperfect clothing that has the right look that you're going for.
You can never wear an everyday life. It would be perfect.
Exactly right. It's perfect for photo shooting. So you use those things like that just to make it happen.
Yeah.
So
she forgot her blouse that morning, so
you ended up replacing the blouse. And so that becomes, you get a scarf and you photograph the scarf and you put that in it. And so you come up with something that looks like this.
Yeah. Sorry, just out of curiosity, what's the bird symbolize of?
So back in 19, well,
this is the
18, during the viruses that were going on then, these were the masks that the French doctors would wear. And that they were the plague masks. And so that is a historic mask from that time.
Well, it's not
a replica.
It's a replica of the
historic mask.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it was just, I mean, we've done front porch portraits, we've done all these kinds of different things. It was how do you kind of play off the idea for her senior year, graduating from high school, going off to college. You know, how do you reflect just the times of the day? Be a conversation piece for her and her future children, should she have any. Yep. Okay. So, go ahead.
Can I interrupt really quick? Here's a question from Abby. I think he's referring to the previous shots with Vincent van Gogh's wheat field.
Yep.
He said, would a 600 work in such shot?
Yes. Now the 600 would just have to be closer to your subject, or you would have to change what your f-stop is to some degree, just to open up a bit because it has less power, so it doesn't have to work as hard. But the difference between the 600 and the 1200, I guess in theory, is a full stop. It says, will the 8600 support this kind of photo? Absolutely. Just like when we did the shot inside the train station with the 300, it could have been done with a V1. You know, but it just depends on how close you need to get your lights to your subject matter. What we would probably have done if it was this type of shot here, and we were shooting it with a 600, we may not have been able to show as much room to the side. We may have had to come crop in just a little bit tighter and make them a little bit more larger in the frame if we didn't have enough power to throw and be able to get light on their face.
One of the games that Luke and I play is trying to do so much that's on camera so that we don't have to phone out the boxes.
Yeah, I mean, when possible. So this is a popular technique that wedding photographers use all the time, whether it's with a 300 or a 600 or whatever, is they'll bring their assistant in or put the light stand in the shot, shoot the shot so they get the proper light on the individuals, and then they just simply remove those stands and then shoot the reference shot. It helps to use a tripod, but you don't have to. And then now you can just quickly erase out your lights if you need to. But with the 1200, you have so much power, you don't have to do that anymore.
When you're doing that.
Yeah. But like to me, I was thinking in Abby's shoes, right? I'm thinking if I use 8600 and retouch the lights out, because 8600 here, it's not only the lights for her face, it's also almost creates a string of line bleeding through the wheat field. If we retouch out, would that look has this finesse as yours? It's a trade-off people need to make there, right?
Right. So you're always trying to be creative within what tools you have on hand at that time. And so if you had it too close, obviously because of the fact that we're using these and we've got these snoots on them here, or whatever you want to call this dish, right? We're trying to keep it so that its direction comes across, but we don't want the fall off that would naturally occur right here to be in the shot. You know, we want this area lit going all the way over to where they're going to be. You know, looking at it from this perspective here, you know, we want the light to be hitting all this area right here. If you can see my mouse. So we want to light up that area right there. And if this light's moving closer, it's gonna fall off, and so it's gonna start to vignette on the edges there.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, there is a difference, I guess.
Well, absolutely. I mean, a tool solves a particular problem. That's the beautiful thing about a tool.
Yeah.
You know, but for some people, they may not either want that, or they may not. They may want to be more portable. You know.
Yeah.
And the 600, the wonderful, wonderful light for having power and portable.
So this next shot we're going to show you was shot in a parking lot. One of the beautiful things about the pandemic is there's all these corporate parking lots that are empty right now because everybody's working from home, and some of them have beautiful, beautiful landscape. So for this one that we did here, this is shot with two 80-1200s. One is placed in front of her, or to the side of her here, and on this side, and one is placed behind her, just to help give us a little bit of separation and make her stand out from the picture. But that one was dialed way down. We wanted to have a little light coming through the bottom of her dress to make it feel kind of translucent there, so it didn't just go dark in the background. And so that's what that light's purpose really was. But the primary light for this picture was definitely the octabox that we had very close to her on the side. And so this is what it looked like straight out of camera. So you can see that we had it free here. There's some signs in the background. We actually have her standing directly in front of a light pole. So that's how we figured out where we need to position her head and her body, is to blot out the light pole that's behind her. And then, hey, hello from Ghana. I don't speak your language. I apologize. I only know a little bit from Senegal, which is Wolof, which I think we would say Nangi Def is how you say hello. So I don't know if you speak any Wolof, my friend in Ghana, but if you do, perhaps you speak some French. Bonjour. So doing the shot in a parking lot, you wind up with something like this. You know, you got to take your side and stretch it out a little bit. You got to remove the green tree that you couldn't get rid of, and so you wind up with something like that.
Yeah, and when Murren went into the prop closet, all of a sudden this dress stood out to her. She said, "Oh, this is what I want to wear. This is the time period that we had." And I had bought this parasol from off eBay when one of my daughters was getting married, and I took it to England with me. And I thought it was from the 1820s, but it had actually a snap on it. And we found out later that snaps weren't invented until about 1850.
Yeah. I see we got people from India and from Pakistan, so I'd say namaste, and I'd say kamcho, kamcho if you happen to be Gujarati, and I can't remember for Pakistan. I feel like this is a smiley. It's keseho, I think is how you say it. Anyways, probably butchering all this stuff, but hello to everyone. Thank you for being here. Key thing here is that, you know, her hand holding on to the hello from Russia. So you'd say Dobry Den, or you say Dzień dobry is what you'd say, I think. So Dzień dobry, hello. But just that hand pulling back on the floral fauna, you know, on the reeds there, kind of makes her feel connected to it, as opposed to her just standing behind it, and then it would feel like it's just kind of like foreground and then her. And so that was just a way to kind of connect her with the foreground as she's there.
And show how her eye wants to go in.
Here you go. Yep.
Well, I'm not as good at it. But typically our eye, when it reads, kind of starts here and it goes down. So we want the grass to kind of bring your eye back up and around. Sorry about that. And that back through the umbrella, and then maybe end up right here around the face.
Yeah, so for those that are newer to photography, there's different design principles that you can employ, but circular observation is one. Certainly for those countries that happen to read in an opposite manner, instead of their eye entry from here, oftentimes it enters from here. Either from the top or from the bottom, your eye can read in and around. And so that's just kind of understanding the gaze. And then even here, notice the strength of her gaze. It's not directly at the camera aware. It's pointed off this direction. And so we're able to just admire her and appreciate her more so than we are connected with her like in a portrait pose.
This was the one time in the summer when we had her hair.
Yes, it was. So again, here's the straight out of camera picture. Because we had her hair and makeup done, then we went back in the studio and said, let's just do a quick, like what we consider more of a classic portrait. And so that becomes a shot like this. Now there is kind of, there's a veil around her. Excuse me. Do my sneeze cover right there. There's a veil that's around her there. We didn't want to make her overly bridal because she's not yet at a stage of getting married, but we wanted a softness to the shoulders. We wanted to bring the camera down low to really give her that strong neckline.
Yeah, we kind of brought the camera down around her chest area to give her that long neck and almost shoot under her chin and make her feel kind of heroic as a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And then a lot more chisel on her because she's just 18, but to me in this one, she looks like she's in her 20s.
Yep. So one of the things that I think that even kind of comes into play here, if I was starting out and trying to learn more about portraiture and stuff like that, we talk about things, dropping the camera down, making her neck longer. What are the benefits to someone to be able to see her face like this? Or in this case, we were also down from a little bit lower angle and giving her more of a chisel there, so we kind of give her some shadow down here. What's the benefit of giving that form to someone that's youthful like that?
Well, to me, it also makes them look thinner.
Yep.
When you bring it down to a chest area when you're shooting maybe 3/4 or longer.
So how about I say it to you like this? One of the things that you oftentimes get frustrated at when you see photos of essentially where people so fixate on the mask of the face and trying to get that all of a sudden they put essentially a head on top of just a neck. And so it makes it look like their shoulders come up too high, and you don't get that long length, that youthfulness coming through there, because it a lot of times it has to do with the neck and having that. A lot of times too, you might see people, which is more popular in perhaps, let's say, boudoir or something like that, but or sometimes more the glamour type look where they'll connect the chin to the neck. And it can have kind of a soft, demure look, but it also creates a visual tangency when that chin comes in relation to the shoulder. Yeah. And so that's one of the things that we try and watch out for when we're doing stuff.
And typically, when I talk to a model, I actually say it starts at the collarbone, even below the neck.
Yep, it starts here.
Yes.
Yep, in terms of their posture. And then bringing those shoulders back, which elongates here and kind of pulls it all together.
And then after you get that, then you can move your head around.
Exactly. And I'd say this too, if I was starting out, one of the things to know is that when, as a man, if I'm looking at you here and my head goes towards my lower shoulder, it's more masculine. And when my head goes to my raised shoulder, it looks more feminine. And so as you can see here, we've brought it so that this shoulder is the one from camera that's a little bit higher than this one. It's just soft. It's not overly dramatic, that angle that's there, but this shoulder being higher and then this being lower gives her kind of that feminine look as she's there. In a similar way here, notice that this shoulder is the one that's higher and her head happens to be turned this way. And so that gives her that feminine look versus if her head had come to tilt towards that lower shoulder. Yeah. Okay, so we took her then back. Okay, is the photo of a girl with an umbrella? Let me see what the thing. The spirit of impression. Yes, it does have kind of that impressionistic feeling, doesn't it? So this is probably good to talk about just quickly, and I know that we had questions about post-productions as well. But just in a general sense, when you're thinking of how to interpret a photo, does that start when you open up the picture that you captured in Photoshop? Is that when you think about how to interpret it?
It starts actually when I'm thinking about it in my head or drawing a pencil drawing. It's usually something has captured my interest. Either I was looking on Pinterest and I saw something and I go, oh my goodness, I love this time period or this. Or the color palette or the color harmony, and
or you're looking at paintings. You're looking at anywhere that you want for inspiration,
absolutely,
and a time period. And so obviously the dress that she has on there kind of reflects, not being modern, current day, and so it lends itself. And then the fact that it's kind of more abstracted in terms of there is no real background being shown. There's some trees in the distance there, but because you have the movement of the foliage, this is an image that lends itself to more of an impressionistic interpretation. And I think one of the things that people oftentimes get stuck on is they get lost in Photoshop. So they start off in Photoshop, they start working on something, and all of a sudden they've stared at it for a long time, and then they go, now what was I doing? Where did I want to go with this? Yeah. And that's always a good time to pause and stop and reflect and go back to whatever your initial idea was to begin with.
This green fabric right here is covering up the parking lot.
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem solving, in terms of how that's done. If we had not pulled this out here, then you would have seen parking lot here in the background. That's exactly right. Okay. So the next shot, we took her back into the studio, and for this we wanted to use our continuous lights. Mm-hmm. And so this is a theme that we've done different variations on over time, but the idea behind it really comes to if you got that message, whether that was you were reading a letter from someone, mm-hmm. and all of a sudden they had something tragic to say to you, or the phone rings.
Yeah. For me, I was thinking that she was ironing her special dress for, like, maybe excited to be going out on a date when she gets the phone call. It says it's all falling apart.
Yeah. So however you'd want to interpret it, there's kind of a duality. There's the artist's intent of what you're trying to do, but the question is, as the observer, as the viewer, what do you see here? And I would say the things that you would describe just right offhand is you go, I see that there's an iron that's in her hand. I see that there's a phone that's on the ground. There's a time period, obviously, that's being reflected to this, which takes it both. It's a modern in the sense of we have phones today, but they're also specific type phones. It's a rotary phone, and then obviously the fan itself.
Well, the props are from the 1940s.
Yep, and then the iron itself is from a time period. So you kind of pull those elements together to get the time period. The set we built, we went very monochromatic intentionally, because this is one where we're starting to get into color theory. And color theory being just, there's different things. If you watch some of our other videos, certainly we go into more detail there. I don't want to overwhelm people here, but what you should know is color is one of the ways we can create visual impact. So we can create it both with something like this, where we basically make everything within the scene go very secondary, mm-hmm. because we've gone very monochromatic with all the elements, the chair, the table, the walls, the floor. Yep.
Analogous color scheme.
Yep. So we use these lights here, and we also use the S30, but we use the SL200s in order to be able to accomplish this shot. What we did here, this is the straight out of camera. What we did straight out of camera. Let me make sure I pull up our metadata, which is always, as you continue on your journey, you'll find that the metadata is some of the least interesting conversations, but when you're starting your journey, it's some of the most essential, because you're looking for road markers. Yeah. You're looking for things that kind of tell you, like, go 55 on this road. Things that help you get along down the process. So for this one, we shot at ISO 200. It was shot at f5.6. It was shot at a 30th of a second, and it was using a 24 millimeter lens. And you can see there that we have a light that's up in the top corner that's kind of coming to be our separation light that's hitting her here, coming down from up there. But that's not all the lights we used. The other lights that we used is, you can kind of see from here, we've flagged off our windows there inside of our garage. So basically, our studio is above our garage, is the correct way to say it. And so we don't want those lights to always come through there. We want the lights that we're meaning to use to work. There's actually right here, you're going to see there's a gridded light. And so when we come around from this side here, you can see we boomed this light in so that we could come in and be able to get our separation light. And then we've got our grid light here that's coming to strike her. The way that it's angled is we're trying to do it so it kind of spills across her. Dad talked about it earlier being a feathered light. We didn't want to have too much light hitting the foreground.
And there was a little bit of light that was falling off her feet, just a little too much. I really wanted to show the angular awkwardness of the legs.
Yep. And so in order to accomplish that, we then took one more light and we bounced it into a reflector down here, because we wanted that light to be a bit more diffused than directional. We still wanted it coming from the same direction, but what we wanted it to do is not have the same intensity to it that the other lights are our main light. And so that's how you get something that looks like, I'll blow it up this. I can blow it up. Yep. I was going to go back to this one right here, which is kind of that straight out of camera type shot, to also talk about just even set building. If you're just trying to do something very simple, all you need is some panels of some type, a wall.
We just painted the wall.
Yeah, we just painted this wall on the background, and then we had a wall panel that we had built. This is just a baseboard, a board, that's being painted and just set across, a board painted and just set across. And then the same thing, just some thin masonite that's been painted and laid down for the ground. And so that's how you create a scene that looks like this, because you know that this is all you're going to actually show from your frame.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how to demystify, that process. Are there any questions there on that have come in, Aries, or are we good? Or do you have a question there on that? Aries, I can't hear you, my friend.
Sorry, I mute myself.
Yeah, no,
during the talk. So I actually have a story. I have a question about the story. Like, she's holding this ironing thing and she's making the telephone call. Like, it's just too much work. You feel the depression, and if you could talk about the story or the artistic reference behind it, that would be awesome.
The depression she feels, I would say, is it's somewhat emotive from her face, somewhat, but I would say it's primarily conveyed by her gesture, right? That's what's conveying the fact that she literally has stopped the action we would expect her to be in, and she just has had to collapse. We don't know what message it was that she got on the other side of the phone. We could tell you as the artist what we are suggesting it is, that she was perhaps stood up on a date or something along those lines. But all of us have had times where we've received the phone call that had bad news.
And this is part of an artist statement, whether it's frustrated at the train station or receiving disappointment. And it all started actually with my mother, who was married at 19 and was a widow at 20, and just hearing the bad news of a spouse's death and what happens when you receive that news.
And her husband that died was not my grandfather, my dad's father, but it is a story that certainly was passed on, because that is rather traumatic to get married. You're full of excitement. And in his particular case, he had a polyp in his nose, and this is, obviously pre-World War II, but he had gone into the doctor not expecting anything, and that polyp at that time had burst in his nose, and he died at the doctor's office when he was just going to get it investigated. And so
that's close.
Okay. However, but point being that we've all had tragedies or things that happen to us where we receive news. And so this was one way of conveying it, and we have done others in the past where we've had somebody reading a letter or doing different things. However you want to receive news, it can be sent to you.
Here we have another question regarding from Charlie.
Yep. Do you know what lighting you will need, or is it trial and error? So the answer is yes, we know what lighting we will need, and that is experience. Generally speaking, we may not know. Let's say that we're going to use 5 lights to do something. We may know going into it the 4 lights that we're planning on using, and the 5th light is we need to solve a particular problem. So, for instance, here we knew that we needed to have this light here. We needed to have this light here. We even had a light over to this side here that was just bouncing up, again controlling the ratio so it wasn't as directional and softening the shadows. But this light here for her foot, that wasn't a light that you realized you had to solve.
Idea.
Yeah, until all of a sudden you get into looking at your tests and you say, this area is going too dark on her legs. I have too much fall off. Now, one way to have solved that could have been lowering this and or even taking out the grid. But particularly for what we were pre-visualizing, we knew that we wanted this area back here to go a bit darker and become secondary. So that was part of the desire to keep the grid on there.
And the grid, keep a narrow beam of light. But you know what I did when I put that light up there? I should have put it on a arm.
Yeah.
So to lower it. Now that I look at it, I really didn't need that extra light had I lowered that light.
Yeah.
But in the moment, you you're
Yeah.
trying to solve 10 problems. And
Yep. So what he's saying there is that the C stand itself can only go so low, and that's where if he had an arm, he couldn't reduce the height of the C stand. So if he had an arm, he could have then put it at an angle, just like we put this one at an angle, and gotten it down lower to where that light would have accomplished that. And I think sometimes the whole job of photographer, besides the psychology that we do with the people in front of our cameras, is problem solving. It's visual problem solving. And then looking at what it is that the camera captures and determining if it is, if it matches what your vision was going into the shot.
Yeah.
And if it does, then you move forward. If it doesn't, then you figure out how do I back into fixing whatever it is that I need to
can you go
accomplish.
back to the big picture, Luke? I want to show them a tangency to the final one.
To the final one? Yep.
Go do 200% on the tip of the iron. Look.
Yeah. Right here.
You see where it's hitting the cloth and they intersect like that? That's called a tangency. And that's a big mistake. Had that iron gone down another quarter of an inch or a half an inch, it would have made it stronger.
Yep. So in other words, if we had allowed the iron in her hand to fall down so that the tip of it broke the edge of this, it would have given it a better shape and would have helped to avoid the tangency that he's talking about here. There are, let's say, 8 different types of visual tangencies. If you were to just Google visual tangencies and how to problem solve them, you'll be able to learn that. But the one that's here is an abutment issue where two things are kissing off of each other. Even here, if we had let the phone come even just a little bit further over into this area, it's somewhat less offensive because of the fact that there's the shadow there that's coming in. And then the other thing that you have to figure out when you have a circle like this is where do you want to put this line? And that's where we were primarily fixating our eyes on is camera position in relation to how we wanted this line to come in and intersect with her head so it wasn't as offensive.
And during our summer internship, this was her very first shot. So it was almost getting accustomed to shooting together again.
Yep. So, may I ask what that mirror or round frame behind refers to? Yep. So the purpose of the mirror.
It's just a visual,
Architectural. It's architectural. It's just-
architectural element. And it was a style that was popular in the 40s.
Yeah, so I mean, Farouk, since I know that you're playing on such a high level here, in this particular case, it almost is confirming forms. So because we have the circle that's been introduced here with the fan, there is the repetition of the circle confirms for you the presence of circles within this picture, and that even the fact that we know that this table is circular in the way that it is. So it's just confirming forms is something you can explore.
Show the triangles. So
Well, yeah, boom, yeah. It's just a graphic reference. Yep.
Boom, 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 boom.
Yep. Okay, I need to see what Mr. Don's question was. When do you know you want to use continuous versus strobes, or is it preference when you do the shoot? Yep. So we love shooting with continuous. First of all, it's fast, easy. You can see exactly what's going on, and then you don't have any recycle times.
And 5 years ago, the LEDs were not bright enough, but now we've got these new like 200 watts, which many times I actually have to turn them down just a little bit because they're almost too
Too bright.
powerful now.
Yeah, if you want to have a more shallow depth of field, for sure. But
I like having that kind of power if I need it.
But in terms of problem solving, going out into the field or approaching a photo shoot, I'll give you an example today. My dad and I were going to go do a photo shoot, and it was a bridal portrait, and we decided we were going to use the 600s for our shoot, and so we packed those in the car. But then we decided to go ahead and put the two 1200s in the car, just in case, because we knew that potentially we were going to have to be shooting. Our shoot was supposed to be from 12 to 2, and
Middle of the day.
middle of the day. It was going to be interior primarily, but then they wanted to do some outdoor shots. As fate would have it, the 1200s remained in our car, and when we did our outdoor shots, we ended up doing them with the 600s because they still had enough power. We just had to bring them closer. We had to take the diffusion off the front of our softbox in order to allow that light to strike the subject just a bit more. But at that point in the shoot, it was kind of that last 15 minutes where they're going, okay, can we quickly go out and get our shots? If the purpose of the shoot had been, let's go shoot outdoors as our primary shooting area, we would have said, then let's start with the 1200s, just so that we had that extra power available to us if we needed. I'd almost describe it as having extra power is like driving on the highway. And when you need to be able to hit the gas to get out of a problem quick, it's nice to be able to have that extra power there. Can you find a way to wiggle your way out? Absolutely, when you have less power. But when we're shooting in the studio, a lot of times we love the quality of the light that comes from continuous. There's just a softness to us that really works, in our opinion, in terms of what we're going for. Absolutely. And so we love shooting continuous when we're inside the studio, and it's that luxury.
And Luke and I both came out of theater backgrounds too, so that was just part of the theater preference.
Yep. Is the mirror placed lower on purpose? Absolutely. So the position of the mirror was in relation to the composition.
And if you go back to the original shot, you can see where the seamless didn't go all the way up in the mirror.
Yep. So, okay. Yeah. So here's another thing. If you were a beginner and you're trying to learn stuff. So in order to not have the mirror show things behind us.
Like us.
Yeah. What we did here is, so here's the camera, and between the camera and our lights, we then pulled down a roll of seamless. This is us as we were starting to try and set up everything and start trying to figure out, there's the mirror, getting ready to hang it type stuff.
The seamless literally went right to the camera lens.
Yep. The seamless we pulled down to right here. So what that basically looks like here is, you can see there's our roll of seamless being pulled down, and that just cuts the reflection down to where it's just continuous tone.
And Luke said, for us to do this right in camera, we need to get some higher seamless stands. And I said, I'll just fix it in post.
Yeah, I did. I said to him, I go, Dad, our seamless stand would only go up so high in terms of because our camera position's down low. And I'm going, we need to raise the seamless up so that we don't see this line. And he was like,
it's high, let it go.
So I'll fix it in post. I'm like, we could move it. Let's go. And so that just gives you something that ultimately you're able just to then make look something like this. So let's go into this shot here, because this is a great one. And this is the one that we show your post-production. How many light sources were used? 5? For this one right here, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 lights. So we have the light that's coming from the top here to give her separation. We have the gridded light. We have the light that was done here for her legs. And then we have one light that's positioned over on this side, which I'll make it easy for you to be able to see. So it would have been positioned over here, and it's just shooting up into the ceiling so that it can just open up what our shadows are.
And that top light's an S30.
Yeah, that top light is. Yeah. And for that, how many percent are you prepare for camera setting and editing? How many percent? I think what you're asking us is how bright do we turn these lights up? Is that a fair guess there? What is the light setting? And I would say to you, on the S30, we had dialed it down to probably 30% from memory, because we didn't want it to overpower. Yeah, and the other ones we probably set at, what'd you guess, 80% brightness? Yeah, 80% brightness. So we're not using the full range of the power that can come from the 200s.
We just needed enough depth of field to go from the phone to the back mirror.
Yep. So let's go to this shot real quick, because this is the one that we do the post-production examples for you on. So this was shot with the VL, or excuse me, I keep doing this wrong, the FV 200, which all you need to know is it's the continuous light that also has the built-in strobe possibilities. And so that becomes really nice just to get that little extra, if you need that little extra power to come in, you can make it fire as if it was a strobe. And so, for this particular light, how did you like this, or for this particular shot, how did you like this shot?
It was almost similar to the way that we lit the previous shot with the ironing board.
So in other words, a light coming from back here for separation, a light coming from the side here, which would have been the FB, and then having a light that's doing a little fill to control the ratios.
Yeah, let me just give you a little backstory on this. Her grandmother, who's a sweet friend of mine, asked Murren to wear her wedding dress, and Murren, being a young 18-year-old, didn't want to do kind of a bridal type shot. So we were trying to come up with a story that would tell about So Great Expectations is a book that she loves. And so we were trying to, I believe her name is Mrs. or Miss Hagersham or something like that, who before her wedding, her husband dies. And so they still had the wedding cake and everything had been covered with dust and spider webs. And she just couldn't get past the fact that her husband died right before their wedding day.
Yep. So bringing in the military jacket here, the military hat, because you're trying to be suggestive of a husband. The vase is turned over, the spider webs, the veil, the whatever you want to look, the stream that's on the face.
There were mice running through everything.
Yep. One of the things that's just kind of like when you talk about when we say in terms of fine art, like a unified series of things. One of the things that you'll find is a lot of times we incorporate mice in our shot. We did a thing for Godox on Henry Peach Robinson with the Godox V1, and you'll notice in that shot we included the mice.
We put them in so subtly you'll have to really see it.
Yep, but it's just kind of that reoccurring theme that we bring throughout the different shots as just being kind of like a fingerprint of sorts, a signature type thing, a tell of who the author was, who's the creator.
So what's the vase that the lavender is referring to? It's just interesting.
The vase being turned over?
Yeah.
Yeah. It just suggests to you that things are not right. Obviously, this is a disturbing image in the way that it's being portrayed. It's using the exact same set that we had used before, using the exact same mirror. But, what makes this image striking really has to do with its composition and the use of dominant mass. The fact that he's got this weight down here at the bottom.
You have your triangle.
Yep. Yep. But the heaviness of the weight that you've got down here has a real dominant lurking mass to it. So when we first look at this, we don't know whether to be frightened or startled. And the question becomes, were these used, were the spider webs added in post-production?
Yes.
So why don't we go ahead and I'll put this picture up so you can see what it looked like straight out of camera. And then the aperture for this one was 7.1. The shutter speed was 2/50th of a second. And it was shot at ISO 200 with a 35 millimeter. And why don't you start with the 1 minute video?
Can I even say something before you start? We were trying to expand Murren's ability to emote, and anyway, and so this was Luke's grandfather's military jacket, and when we brought it in and laid it by her feet, she actually started crying.
Yep.
So it's just a really she was able to actually accomplish that well.
Yep. So let's watch our 1 minute version of the video, and then if people need us to slow down, Dad, if you can narrate for us just a bit, kind of what your thought process is as you were going in to do the post-production on this. Yep.
Yep.
Do you want me to play it or?
Please, yes.
Okay, sure. Give me 1 sec, really quick. Do I need to share the audio or no?
There's no audio. Dad's going to voice over for you and kind of describe his
Okay, sure.
I'm gonna
Cool.
try.
Yep. Can you guys see it?
Yep.
All right, here we go.
So the first thing that you do is you kind of open it up and you start doing what?
So I basically have areas that I can open up my shadow detail. So I basically open up some areas. I was erasing some areas of the spider webs because the spider webs were supposed to be behind her. I was transforming some spider webs, but then I was going to erase it around her dress and the clothing, which I think I did there. Apparently a little more transforming. Again, just this kind of feeling of grunge and just a grungy room that had not been cleaned, and according to the book, maybe in like 40 or 50 years. So anyway, I was trying to get that real dirty kind of feel to the whole thing.
Yep. Now you're taking it into a different program. This is Topaz, correct?
It is.
Yep.
And I love Topaz. I use it a lot. I'm just deciding which one of these filters do I want. And sometimes what I do is I'll pick one and actually reduce it by 50%, and then I'll actually put the old layer underneath it. Then I'll erase part of the top layer and blend the two.
Yep. And then that gives you the final version. So what I would say to you here is, if you'd like, we also have the 3 minute and the 6 minute version. I know that we only have about 20 minutes left. I don't want to spend too much time on post-production here. But if there's any questions, if we need to slow that down just a little bit, Just know that that's an opportunity. Yep. So here's a question. Could you achieve the same lighting effect of the last two images just by using a 2-light system and positioning bouncing lights from a reflector rather than using 4 lights? Or ideally, you would need 4 lights for a full effect. And I would say to you, my thought,
Absolutely.
you could, but it'd be much easier to do with 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think of the photographers who may
ju-
not
if-
have the
if you-
space
yeah.
or something.
If you didn't have 4 lights, you can pull that off using reflectors. You're just going to have to take a lot more time because you're playing, you're playing physics, right? You got to make sure everything's just bouncing, reflecting, just
like
right.
playing pool.
Playing pool. So you just got to make sure everything's placed in the right areas. But yeah, definitely 2 lights would be able to accomplish what it is that you need.
And by the way, it's good to see you.
Okay, so we had a question about post-production before. What are the programs that you like to use? And what is Topaz?
Topaz is a program, and I'm not sure what, it's not the impressions ones that I use. I'm probably have to go run to my office and see which one I use.
Okay, you run to your office. I'll take over.
I don't know, but I'll
Okay.
come back with an answer.
So here's the thing that you should know about David in terms of the way he does his post-production. He's very much an artist in the process. Some people are very technical, and so that's a good thing, but they do things in a very systematic way. Dad is much more like a chef in a kitchen, so he just salt and peppers to taste. The programs that he uses are just things that he can use to leverage for a particular thing. Topaz is a suite. If you typed in Topaz plugins, you would be able to find their suite of plugins. The particular one that you used here,
Topaz Studio.
Topaz Studio, which Topaz Studio contains Topaz impressions, and so that's why I'm thinking of Topaz impressions. But then you also like using Nik filters sometimes
Very much.
when you're doing. If we were watching that video again, you saw him doing his opening up shadows in different areas and stuff like that. Somebody who's very technical is going to say, well, can't you do X, Y, and Z in Lightroom before you open the raw file? Can't you do X, Y, and Z in Photoshop? Can't you do da-da-da? There's 1,000 different ways to get to the final result. None of them is superior to the other than in the sense of what works in your workflow, unless it solves a particular problem for you.
I'm a guy that just salt and peppers to taste.
I wonder. I think I said those exact words, but you do, and I admire that about you, actually, because you go in and you look at it and you season something so that it reflects the way that you wanted it to be presented, more so than you go into it thinking it always has to look exactly a particular result. So sometimes you might go darker, or you might go heavier on the texture, or heavier on retouching or liquefying or whatever. Other times you do less.
And not all of these are successes. We like to push ourselves, and when you're really pushing yourself past the comfort level, I bet 50% of your images will be failures.
Yeah.
But you learn from the failure.
Absolutely, Prachi. Okay, for us to share back the screen again, do I need to hit stop share screen on my end, or do you hit it?
Which one do you want to?
I was going to go back to the presentation. There we go.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep. Perfect. Okay. So, what else can we do in the studio like that? Well, this was playing off the idea of Caravaggio, and creating a shot like that. This is just using how many lights, Dad?
One, probably 3. One to light the face and the whole gathering. What do you call that?
The harvest,
Yeah.
the bouquet.
And then there was just one kind of a Colt 45 beam that was hitting the background, and probably then
So like a tight snoot.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
and then there was one probably just to control the contrast. It
Yep.
was just hitting the ceiling.
But the reason to use that more snooty type light was to have what? This type lighting on her face here, the more chiseled type lighting on her face.
Now,
Right?
a woman that I mentor, actually, she had come in the evening before, and I said, "Hey, my intern's coming in the morning. This probably took 4 minutes to shoot, and then we were back to work."
And then I'll show you just a couple more real quick that are just finishing out this series with this girl. So this is taking it more into the fantasy type realm. This is photoshopping in the background and putting her within a scene and just lighting her in the studio. These are others that are just us playing around when we're there, playing with desaturated looks. The one on the left of her with the shirt was actually us getting ready for a high school senior that was going to be a paying client. We weren't going to do her in this desaturated way, but we wanted to see how the stool would work and just kind of the idea of the black turtleneck. And then, on the right-hand side, that's just photographers being photographers, having just the weird things and just taking pictures.
Aries, I bought $700 worth of masks just for my grandchildren because they were in Italy and I knew that they were not going to be able to speak English, and I wanted to do a book and help them to learn English. Well, actually, English is their first language, even over in Italy. And so I've never been able to use the mask, but again, she didn't want to look like a bride, so we put a rhinoceros head on her.
Yep. So I'm going to go into some of the stuff we've done with the 600 Pro, and we love these. We love modifiers. Hear me very clearly. We love modifiers, but you don't need a modifier in order to go out and shoot things. So this is two bare bulb 600s. And I shot this specifically in TTL just to say, if somebody was not trying to figure out how to do math or are not ready for ratios, in the sense of saying, I want to set it at a quarter power or half power or full power. They just wanted TTL. The camera, the 600 that was over here on the side that was lighting her face, getting her shape and form, that one was set to +1 for the TTL. So I really wanted it to over push in the scene. And the one that I had put over to the right of the camera, I had set that one at -2 because I just wanted it just to add just a little fill light so that it wasn't overly directional. So I just softened some of these ratios. And my mental vision for how this picture was going to ultimately be is I saw her, this was a different girl that we were shooting. Jessica, I saw her very much as like a piece of, call it the resistance of a strong woman, the revolution, all this kinds of stuff. But I saw her in this kind of more like she was a button that was being worn on somebody's jacket or something like that she represented an idea, behind her with her strength. So I saw her and I wanted to present her in a very circular manner. 5 minutes after that shot, went and moved over to a different spot, switched out her fabric, switched out her top, grabbed the chains. And the funny thing about the chains is our eye, when we look at something, believes something has mass to it. What do I mean by mass? It has weight to it. So these are plastic chains.
Like you would buy for Halloween.
Yeah, for Halloween, right? But if you put the actual physical chains on her, she probably couldn't lift her arm and do that kind of stuff. But I knew that I wanted to create this shape and this bend, and that she was having to reach to something and reaching out, and just that tension as she was almost like she was growing up out of the ground. And so this kind of gives you an idea. Do a little liquefy here on the fabric, and so boom, Bob's your uncle. Another one that we did with the 600 would have been a shot like this in the studio. And so, the shot on the left, she doesn't even need to wear pants because you're going to crop in. She had on shorts, of course, but the key was to get her hair done in the proper way so that the fish could then be shot and be put on top of her, almost as if she was smelling like something fishy's going on around here.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So whenever you see fish, it's either kind of a fishy smell or what's going on, or there's fish on your head.
Yeah, exactly. More that we did with Jessica, just to show people just kind of straight out of camera versus interpretation. This is just her shot against just a simple background, sitting down, and then you've got the final result. Something like this we wanted to show because we wanted to show people you're having to use booms and stuff to kind of come in here and hold things in place, and the clamp that's up here at the top, to be able to get this because she's really wearing it. And then the final part becomes then going into Photoshop and then doing your skin tone work and then your final color grading.
Yeah. And the makeup artist said, well, give me just a little time. I'll go ahead and put all her hair up under the clamshell. I said, I can do it faster.
I can do it faster in post. Another one on getting into some set building. We didn't want to go too heavy on set building with this talk, but sets are a great way for you to define a space And so this would be more of a simple set, turning the checkerboard pattern at an angle, and now you've got the diagonals instead of the rows coming in. And then, of course, you just do your foam core walls in the background and create a shot like this, and you just figure out where you need to arrange your elements. You can go into more fantasy in the way that you do stuff, which would be a shot like this. And so from a shot like this, all you have to do is then on the post, come in and Photoshop whatever your scene is that's going to be outside the window. You can see that we've got the gridded lights, we've got the rim light coming in to be able to hit her.
And we had light coming through the
And we had light we had to have light that gave kind of a translucent feel here in terms of the window frame that we had built for the set.
Yeah. Just for the audience here, how many lights were using in the previous image, and what lights and what each light's for?
Yeah. So how many lights were being used in this shot? I'm going to guess 4.
I would say 3 or 4.
3 or 4. Yeah, you've got obviously the one directional one here. You've got this one here close to the rim. You've got one here, and then the question becomes, did he end up bouncing on? I'm going to guess actually 3 because I don't see our ceiling lit up here, which says to me you probably weren't bouncing light in.
But usually I put, even though we have window light on the other side, I usually put an LED to kind of add that little extra.
Yeah. Because you want to create the illusion that whatever it is here is creating some light here, but you also have some light that, it's not justified, but you're using it you want to shape this person here as opposed to letting them go into darkness so that they kind of become almost cut out within the scene, and that gives them their dominance within the scene.
I was trying to I didn't elongate her. All I did was just change the shape of her hips to kind of give her that kind of thin, elongated feel that I was.
But the whole point is that separation light is being put here to kind of make it so that she doesn't blend in with the background and it doesn't go so dark here that the picture becomes heavy on the right-hand side. We want the eye to go to the person and what's happening with the person, and then realize that they're within that particular scene.
And trying to play off the complementary colors too, that basically make the red just a little twinge off to make it more orangey.
Aries, you had a question?
Yeah, I was wondering why we use the front light, field light, and why we use grid, just for the audience here.
Yeah, so grid just helps you get a very directional, very contrasty light. And a snoot or something like that also does a narrow beam of light. So you can see here where that light here is coming and hitting on her hair right here and hitting on her shoulders.
I was going to disagree with you barely. I think this light, the grid light, is bouncing this way to just open up a little bit of shadow detail.
Yeah, no, he's talking about like what is the purpose of a grid light in general.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, why would you use a grid light? Yeah, why would you use a snoot, right? In basic photography senses, the larger your light source, the closer your light source, the softer the light. The further the light is from your subject or the smaller it is, then the harsher. And what do we mean by harsher? It means it casts a harder shadow. So a soft light casts a very soft shadow. A harsh light creates a very harsh light, much like if you went outside in the middle of the day and you look at any shadow around, as opposed to on an overcast day where you realize all the shadows are very soft.
But when you have a big light source, it can also have still, and those grids help keep it more defined.
Yeah, and that's what you do so if you're using a gridded light source and you want that soft quality in the direction of your light, but you don't want the light spilling out everywhere, that's what the grid comes in handy for. And I remember when we first started using grids, it really messed with you because you had gotten so accustomed to not using grids and figuring out how to feather and do different things that also the grid added so much contrast to the shots that you were going, I need to do something. And that's why we ended up adding more of a bounce light into a ceiling to then lessen the ratios that way. Yeah.
Here's a question from Steve.
Well, do you want to go through Steve's question or do you want to go through your question?
Hey, Steve.
So let's answer Steve's real quick. So, Steve's asking a leading question, and I appreciate that, but
because nobody knows better than Steve.
Steve knows composition so well, but the question being, do we build a set and compose or and figure it out on the back end, or do we sketch the design first and then build? And the answer is you always start by sketching out first, right? And then you build. because that's how you know what to build, how to problem solve. Oftentimes you start with, the initial ideas that you want to explore. From there, you'll actually light the scene within your head. You'll figure out any number of different variables. What are your colors? What are the right objects within a scene? The trick within symbolism is oftentimes you want to use as few symbols as possible. If this was too busy a scene over here, then it may distract you, but just having single element, her element, and then the window as an element kind of creates this interesting walk here as you kind of go in kind of this zigzag pattern as you go through the composition. So that's all something you intentionally think out ahead of time.
Absolutely. Yep. Steve, I believe you do too. I know you do.
Well, I know he's good at being able to see composition.
Everybody wishes they could shoot like Steve.
And this is just more just doing very simple stuff. Simple backgrounds, whether you're adding it as a texture in Photoshop or if you're just blurring it in the background. And we were going to end with just kind of taking into just a little bit more complexity for people to show what could you do, right? So maybe this is something to inspire you to do. So let's say that you wanted to do something, but you didn't have enough money to build an entire set. Well, you could just build half the set, and then you take the other half and you flip it in post and you complete the shape, right? So only things that were built were this wall, and then this wall is just put in post, and this wall is put in post, and you complete the scene.
I actually had the material. It's just that she called and said, I can only do it on this day. And I said, I haven't finished the set. And I said, come on, I'll build it later.
But if I was starting out, I'd want to know that I can get by with just having only certain parts of a puzzle to create my finished picture. And so this is just a backdrop that's hanging in the background. And then you have the person that's in here. You got to make sure that whatever you have them sitting on is wide enough to support their weight, so they can fit comfortably. Having the separation between the legs, this triangle is key. One of the things that you'll learn is you don't want the light underneath here being too bright. Otherwise, this would become a visual trap, just like this could become a visual trap, or this could become a visual trap. So you tone those areas down, you let them go darker.
While studying art history, it was time to study Maxfield Parrish. So I was trying to get these kind of Parrish blues.
If you want to go more Renaissance in your look, this is a set. These are all being built in the same above a garage type space. More in the style of Vermeer. You've got the light coming from the left. You've got a leaded glass window. You put your roof in, which is actual physical wood being put in here. You've got your fabric that you've put there. The only thing that ended up in post realizing needed to be refined somewhat ultimately was what?
Another tangency.
Yeah. So walk through that.
Well, look at this. This post was almost kind of at the same height as her head. Not quite a tangency, but it's too close. So I ended up just enlarging her a little bit so this would break a little bit more towards the back of the neck.
And from a proportion standpoint, from a scale standpoint, it gives her more dominance within the frame. She's being lost a little bit within the scene here, but then by increasing the scale of her in post, she now has the dominance that was the original intent. And unless you know what you're going for going into it and how to, because the problem solving doesn't stop after the capture. The problem solving stops once you've completed a picture. Yeah.
But again, this is just part of trying to do everything where we don't have to Photoshop anything in.
Yep. Another quick one just to show you was just a simple set like this. However, this simple set was done on 3 different layers. This is the straight out of camera capture. So you build a wall as a plane. You build a secondary wall that's spaced about 12 feet back. And then you build a third wall behind that, another 10 feet back, and you just have that suggestion of color.
Backdrop of the sky behind that.
Yep. And all we were able to do in this scene was be able to light. We had a light coming here to strike her. We had a light behind me as the camera operator just doing fill. And then we had a light coming from back here to be able to strike on him and also on this wall. And those lights were boomed up high above the walls so they could then shoot down over them, because these walls are only 8 feet tall, which is why you can see right there the top of the wall. And of course, in the finished version of the picture, then you just have to come and digitally stretch to fix that area that you go, well, nothing I can do about that. Unless I wanted to build a much higher set. And shooting inside the same studio here inside of our home, shot with Dad. Bringing in, that's the actual straight out of camera shot, so you can kind of get just kind of a feeling of how to do it. You know, there's a light being placed back here, striking on this wall. There's a light that's coming from over here, striking him. There's a light that's put back in this corner that's shooting back this direction to give us that light that spills on the floor and gives us those highlights, which we wanted to be able to have. It's called a rake light in film terms, but there's different terms you could use.
And the basic humor in all this is that it was if you can blow it up big, the magazine basically was a kind of a French maid who says, I'll do all the dirty work. And so I ordered one, and I actually got a real maid.
Yeah. So it's playing off the idea of a man who's at the hotel and he rings up the front desk, has some sort of code, but then it's missed expectations. Let's just call it that, missed expectations. And, you know, we always joke that the woman here who played the role, who's the punchline, so to speak, she's actually a theater teacher. And you have to have the right relationship with someone to be able to say, hey, can you be the punchline in a gag? But, you know, for the right personality, they go, absolutely. Like, I totally get it. We're not trying to poke fun at her. It's just playing a part, much like an actress would play a part. You know, this is a shot that we people have seen us show before, just to kind of show the background behind this. You know, the idea being that he's enamored by the picture on the back wall, which, you know, ultimately that's probably, you know, his wife's saying, I'm waiting. She's written on the lipstick, but there's this other girl that he's got as his fantasy.
Well, the story is he's come home like a salesman, and his wife is waiting for him. She's got on a gown just like Rita Hayworth, which is the person he's enamored with. But
Hello?
anyway, the point is he fell for the substitute instead of for the real thing in the next room.
Yep. So this is what that set looks like from there, but I don't think I've ever shown you guys this picture here that kind of shows more of what the lighting of the set looked like. So you can kind of get an idea of how it's all put together. We were teaching a class, and so, you know, obviously you see students there in the foreground and stuff, but essentially you've got...
Speaking of the class, guys, if I'm King, before we...
We frozen?
Hello?
Yep, I got you.
Sorry, we didn't hear the last sentence.
We can hear you.
Well, shall we talk?
Well, we can talk. I don't know. Let me text him real quick and see if he can hear us. Aries, can you hear us?
Sorry.
Yep, we're
Yes,
back now.
yes.
Good.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're back now. Sorry, I think my Wi-Fi is kind of starts to dropping a bit. I was just wondering, speaking of the class, do we have any workshop coming up this year for people in United States to attend, or?
Not at this time.
Yeah.
Everything with COVID is so different. I mean, we're going to teach a class potentially in October, but it's already been rescheduled once, and we'll see if it gets rescheduled again for the Dallas Photography Guild.
But if they wanted to come to town, and if we were doing it,
Yeah.
it would be a very inexpensive way to actually come and learn for 2 days.
Yeah. So do you guys so besides those offline workshops, do you guys have any online
Well,
sort
yes.
of? I know we have the Adopt Me, David. Where can people find you, or do you guys offer one-on-one mentoring stuff?
We offer all of that. However, this, you know, I don't want this to feel like, okay, well, that was nice of Prachi to ask the question. We don't want to make this a solicitation, so to speak. But yes, you can find us at edmondsonphotography.com. You can also just look at Luke Edmondson or at David Edmondson for our Instagram and social media. And we have a Beyond Craft, the art of photography, which is essentially for people that are ready to go beyond just craft and technique and really get to the art side of things. That's a 15-lesson email series that you could take, where there's video lessons in there as well, where we talk to you. You could also, of course, do one-on-one mentoring by just reaching out to us. So those are some of the things that you might consider. Yep.
Okay, so what's the website so I can type that into the
Sure.
so people can make it easy. Beyond Photography, right?
Or Beyond Craft. Beyond Craft, the art of photography. I'd have to send you the link real quick. They'll Google it.
Yeah, if you can send me the link, that would be great. Yeah, so that people can easily get a hold of you. And Charlie's also asking, do you offer personal feedback?
Yes, we do.
Yes.
In fact, we learn so much, and we love giving people feedback. That we really do, and even very specifically, and even some of the top people who in this industry still need feedback, even though there's sometimes very little things that we can share with them. Wouldn't you say?
We all need feedback.
Every one of us, absolutely.
Yep. All right, Aries. I have just responded to your question, but essentially, the shop.edmondson photography would give you access to critiques if you want to do critiques, if you want to do the email course, those kind of things. So, Aries, you tell me in terms of our time, do you want to just show them the video that I sent you in terms of like how we went about creating this particular picture? Or do you think we should answer some more personal questions that may have come in? What would be best for you?
I think we are good for now. If there's no further question, maybe let's just call it for the day, and we can show the rest for the next in the next Facebook talk. I think that'll be the.
Yep.
All right, cool. All right, thank you guys for your time, and if there's no further question, let's call it for the day, and I will see you guys until next time.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Bye.